Hello and welcome to the RiverWatch refresher video on dragonflies, damselflies, hellgrammites, and alderflies. This video is intended for RiverWatch volunteers to hone their identification skills and refresh some of the things that they learned at the workshop. RiverWatch is a program of the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center. For RiverWatch, we use 37 different macroinvertebrates as indicators of water quality. In this video, we will be in the insect category, looking at hellgrammites and alderflies, and then down here, dragonflies and damselflies. First, we will look at dragonflies and damselflies. So as you can see in this picture, these are the larvae of damselflies right here and a dragonfly right here. To know the difference between a dragonfly and a damselfly, you look for the really wide abdomen on a dragonfly as opposed to the narrow abdomen on a damselfly. And the damselflies usually have these feather-like gills on the end of their abdomen. So that's how you tell these apart. Now let's look a little bit closer. Dragonfly larvae are in the order Odanata, suborder Anisoptera. And within that, there's many families and genus and species. This is what some different dragonfly larvae look like in a petri dish, so kind of with no magnification. And this is what it looks like a little bit closer, zooming in on the small one at 10 times magnification. And as you can see, dragonfly larvae can look different depending on the one you have. That's because there's many families and species within the suborder Anisoptera. The one thing you always want to look for is that abdomen being the widest part of the body. They all have wing pads. They don't have any gills sticking out of their body. It's because their gills are on their inside of their abdomen, but always look for that really wide abdomen. And then another thing that dragonflies have is a retractable jaw called the labium, pictured right here. They can shoot that out and capture and engulf their prey and bring it back to be devoured. So, then here's what an adult dragonfly looks like. The best way to know if it's an adult dragonfly is if it has two pairs of wings that spread horizontally when it rests. Next, we're getting into the damselflies. For RiverWatch, we use broad-winged and narrow-winged damselflies, so we divide them up. For broad-winged damselflies, we're in the order Odanata, just like dragonflies, but now we're in the suborder Zygoptera. And for broad-winged, it's the family Calopterygidae. This is what the broad-winged look like in a petri dish, kind of a long, narrow fly larva. And then, if we look a little bit closer, you can see those feather-like gills that set it apart as a damselfly. And if we look even closer, we see the defining characteristic for a broad-winged damselfly is the elongated first antennal segment. So that segment is longer than the rest of the segments on the antenna. That's a great way to tell them apart. Overall, broad-winged damselflies the larva is usually the longest and skinniest of the damselfly larvae. Then these are what broad-winged damselfly adults look like. As you can see, when they rest, their wings fold back behind them, unlike the dragonfly, which has them spread out horizontally. Next, we have the narrow-winged damselfly. It is in the suborder Zygoptera, which is the damselfly suborder, but this time it's the families Coenagrionidae and Lestidae. So, technically, only Coenagrionidae is a narrow-winged damselfly. Lestidae is a spread-winged damselfly, but for RiverWatch, we don't make that distinction. So, this is what the narrow-winged damselflies look like in a petri dish. As you can tell, they're a little bit shorter and broader than the broad-winged. We look a little bit closer and we see that shortened body, the feather-like gills on the end. But what's really going to set it apart from the broad-winged damselfly is its antenna segments. So its antenna may be a little shorter, but all the segments are the same length, so they don't have that first long segment. They're divided up into equal lengths. So you can see a comparison here. This is the broad-winged, the long first antennal segment, and the narrow-winged, a shorter antenna with all the segments about the same length. And then here's what a narrow-winged adult looks like. And we want to make that distinction because broad-winged damselflies are typically more sensitive to pollution than narrow-winged damselfly. So this will help give us a more accurate stream quality calculation. Next, we're going to move into the Hellgrammites and Alderflies. This is in the order Megaloptera. So as you can see here, we have a Hellgrammite and then a Alderfly. Now, Hellgrammites is a common name for Dobsonflies and Fishflies. This is in the order Megaloptera, family Corydalidae. This is what Dobsonflies and Fishflies look like in a petri dish. This is a fish fly right here. This is a Dobsonfly. Here's a Dobsonfly, a little bit larger view. They typically have they almost look like a centipede when you first look at them because it looks like they have lots of legs. But actually these up here are the only pairs of legs, so just 3 pairs of legs. All these are lateral filaments with little fine hair-like structures on them used for gills. And then at the end, the Dobsonflies and Fishflies have a pair of hooks, which we can see right here zoomed in, used for anchoring them in the substrate. This is the surest way to know if it is a Hellgrammite, is you look for a pair of prolegs. So these are fleshy legs, they're not jointed. So there's one pair, there's another pair, and each one has a pair of hooks on it for anchoring it in the substrate. So that is what a Hellgrammite end of the abdomen looks like for identification. So we don't actually have to tell apart Fishflies and Dobsonflies from each other in RiverWatch. We just group them into the Hellgrammite / Dobsonfly category. But if you were curious, a Fishfly does not have the gills underneath its lateral, the really thick tufts of hair-like gills under its abdomen as a kind of a breathing tube, that long thing coming off of it right there instead. Its head and jaws are a little smaller, whereas with a Dobsonfly, it's usually a little bit larger larva, larger head, has gills underneath the abdomen, and those tufts of hair like gills. So that's kind of how we can tell the difference between Dobsonflies and Fishflies. But again, for RiverWatch, you do not have to make that distinction. Down here you can see what the adult Dobsonflies / Fishflies look like. These are actually Dobsonfly adults. This is the female, this is the adult male. As you can see, the male has these long, overdeveloped jaws used for grasping the female when they mate. These adults do not live but more than a day or two. They reproduce and die very quickly. Next, in the order Megaloptera, we have the Alderfly, which is family Sialidae, so a different family than the Hellgrammites. Alderflies are considerably smaller than the Hellgrammites, as you can see in this photo of it, larva in the petri dish. If we look a little bit closer, you can see that it also has the lateral filaments that the Hellgrammites had, but just a much smaller fly. The best way to tell it apart is look at the end of its abdomen. Alderflies have a single long terminal filament. Some hairs used as gills also. Whereas, remember, the Hellgrammites had 2 pairs of prolegs with a pair of hooks on each one. So you can see that down here. This is the end of the Hellgrammite, and this is the end of the Alderfly. So that's an important distinction to be able to make, because Alderflies are typically a little bit more tolerant of pollution than Hellgrammites. And then this is what an adult Alderfly looks like. So now that you've been through this video, it's time to test your knowledge to see what you've learned. Use this slide to try to identify the dragonfly larva, the broad-winged damselfly, the narrow-winged damselfly, the hellgrammite, and the alderfly larva. So you can go ahead and pause the video at this point and get out some scratch paper to record your answers, or just do it in your head. And then I will flash the answers on the next slide, so you can go ahead and pause this right now. Alright, here are the answers. So A was the hellgrammite, that is a fish fly down there. B is a alderfly. You can see his single long filament just barely right there. Just a lot smaller larva. The fish fly a little larger, 2 pairs of hooks right here. C was the narrow-winged damselfly, so a little bit shorter bodied. You can barely make out his antenna right there with short segments, no long segments on its antenna. Here's the broad-winged damselfly, a longer damselfly with the first long antennal segment. And then E was the dragonfly. So the abdomen is the widest part of its body, really sets it apart when making these identifications. So that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you on your identifications next time. Thank you.